if you want to practice an embodiment practice, if you want to embody your deepest experience of being, telling the truth is about as good and direct as it gets. And most people think that they basically are truthful. They basically, and to, in one extent, I guess people are relatively truthful, but when you really look at it for a given day, and how do I embody the truth of being? Well, I start by telling the truth. What could be more simple? What could be more direct and obvious? I want to embody the most truthful experience of being that I know in my life, in my relative experience, through my humanity. How do I do that? Well, you start by telling the truth all the time. Okay, great. What is the truth then? Right? So we're not talking about absolute truths. We're talking about what seems to be true for you. You could think of truth also in terms of being totally honest all the time, totally sincere all the time, never deceptive, never deceiving, not only in obvious ways, but all those little ways that you can twist a sentence where you're just a little bit deceptive, where you're not really being completely honest, maybe 85% honest, but not completely honest, And when you really look at this, even for a single day, you endeavor to tell the truth and tell it all the time, you will probably be surprised. You might even be shocked by how often you find yourself shading truths, whether it's out of fear, whether it's out of a kind of subtle or overt deception because you want to hide something, because you don't want to be that exposed, you don't want to be that real, you have a fear of being real. There's 101 reasons and 101 seemingly decent reasons why you might not tell the whole truth. Just tell the truth in terms of being honest, being real. Try that on for size. It's not as easy as you think. And it's very, very revealing. It's very demanding. Well, so, like I said, what is truth then? Well, it's not just mere opinion. It's not just the next conditioned thought that runs through your mind. I remember years ago when I gave a talk about telling truth, and a woman came up to me about a week after that, and she said, Adya, you'll never guess what happened to me after that talk you said, that talk about the truth you had that night, or that day. And I said, yeah, what happened? And she told me the story of, after the talk, going out into the parking lot and being met there by one of her best friends, who also was at the talk. And her best friend said, well, Adya talked about telling the truth, so I'm going to tell you everything I have ever thought about you. And basically what she did was she proceeded to sort of dump her emotional garbage can onto this poor woman, every projected idea and opinion and judgment and, basically every nasty thought she had about her. And this poor woman came back and said, is that what you meant by telling the truth? And I assured her that no, that was not what I meant at all. That wasn't telling the truth. Telling the truth isn't just unloading your judgments on somebody. That's not really telling the truth. Like I said, telling the truth is more about being deeply and precisely honest. And telling the truth means being very open to having your truth change. Because someone else, their honesty, their truth, if they choose to speak it, may inform you. You might learn something. It might alter what's true for you. So as human beings, what we often do is we clutch on to what we think is true, and we when we do state it, we often state it with a fair amount of defensiveness, right? It's almost like we don't want to have our minds changed. We don't really want to be challenged. We don't want to let others tell their truth. And so we're often in a kind of secret competition. Even in the most casual, seemingly pleasant conversation, if you really listen to them, you will often notice a kind of very quiet, well-cultured competition going on. Or it's a kind of competition of ideas, or there's just a complete lack of listening. In the average conversation, usually each person is actually waiting for a gap where they can jump in and say what they want. When the other person is listening, they're not really listening that well. They're just waiting for their gap. And so this is really common in conversation, where part of truth-telling, at least in a conversational sense, is also listening, because it's interest in what's true, what might be true about any moment, true about any situation. You might have a disagreement. You might see something differently. You might state what's honestly true for you. But unless you listen for what's honestly true for somebody else, you're not really going to get anywhere. Your experience of truth may actually be wrong when you get somebody else's reflection. It may end up to be accurate. So for a lot of spiritual people, they would think, well, this doesn't sound particularly spiritual to me. This isn't meditation. This isn't realizing the self. This isn't awakening. This isn't esoteric. And I'll say, no, it's not. But it's demanding, and it's real. It's kind of where the rubber hits the road.